Hello, I am Rochelle, an herbalist and holistic health practitioner in New York City, and I am here to teach you a little bit more about making tea. So we all know a sort of straightforward, simple, basic, tea making 101, but there are actually several different ways to make tea. And some ways are better than others depending on the herbs that you're using, depending on the amount of time that you have, and depending on the sort of benefits you're trying to get out of the herbs that you're extracting. So let's start with the 101, the one that we mostly know, and that is your favorite mug, your favorite tea in a bagged form or in a loose herb form into a tea ball or a strainer, and then we pour hot water into our cup and let it steep for about 5 to 7 minutes. Then you can remove the tea ball or the strainer or remove the tea bag and compost it, or you can leave it in. So unless you don't like the couple of herbs that get bitter, or you don't want your tea too strong, I love to just leave it in there and let it steep the whole entire time that I'm drinking it. Sometimes I'll even try to steep it again, see if I can't get anything else out of the herbs. Not often that you can, but it's worth a shot. So that's the simplest way. And that's actually considered a tisane. So if we're not using the tea plant and we're using herbs, it is an herbal tisane. If we're using a tea plant, then it's an herbal tea. So that's a fun fact for you. Now, another way to make an herbal tea or herbal tisane, but a little bit stronger, is in a pot on the stove. And this you could call a medicinal strength tea. It's almost a decoction, but not quite as strong as a decoction. So this works really well for fibrous plants like roots or medicinal mushrooms. And in here I have chaga. So chaga mushroom is very fibrous. It feels like little rock pieces, and it takes a lot of work to extract from something this fibrous. So to make a medicinal strength tea, you would put your herbs in your pot of water and then fill it up with water. Let it simmer for anywhere from 10 minutes to several hours. So if you're doing a sort of 10-minute simmer, 15-minute simmer, which is generally how I make my personal teas, this would be considered a sort of medicinal strength tea. If you're doing something like medicinal mushrooms and you're simmering it for multiple hours or over the course of the day, that would be considered a decoction. And when you're doing that, you definitely need to be nearby and refilling the water. So the water will, simmer off, and you'll refill more and more and more, and it'll become very, very strong. It's a very concentrated tea when it becomes a decoction. So generally, more fiber in the herbs means more heat or more time on the stove top or sort of extracting. If you have something really gentle and sort of fragile in terms of your plant or your herb, like rose petals, for example, you can do a very light infusion, and this is otherwise known as an overnight infusion. And an overnight infusion will work with hot water. And if you have something that is actually flower petals, often it will work with cold water too. So think flower petals, think really fragile leaves. Something that doesn't have a lot of fiber doesn't require as much heat and time. So the decoction is the long-term simmering, very potent sort of brewed down tea. And then on the other side of the spectrum is your infusion. So to make one of these, what you would do is use a glass pitcher or a mason jar or any kind of vessel that's quite large. About a quart size usually works, but the size is up to you. And then You want at least enough herbs to cover the bottom of the container. If you want a very, very strong infusion, you can fill your herbs up halfway, more, just depends on how potent you're making your tea. Then you pour hot water all the way, fill it all the way up and cover it. Covering when we're steeping and when we're simmering on the stovetop and doing those decoctions or medicinal strength teas, that'll keep the volatile oils in there. So we want to drink those. We don't want those to escape. So pour in the hot water, cover it, and let it steep overnight. And that will give you an overnight infusion. Another way to do this is if you work in an office or you have a sort of home office or a place that you spend all of your days, you can make your infusion at the end of the day and leave it. And then when you come in the next day, it'll be there waiting for you. And then what you'll do is you'll strain it. So you can either strain it with a top like this, you can strain it with your tea strainer, any kind of strainer you have, and drink the whole thing. That's a lot of functional water, herbal multivitamins, goodness that you get to drink all day. And that's about it. I was going to show you my decoction too. So this is a decoction that I have from some rooty herbs that I made. And actually, if you do the chaga that I showed you, it'll be so dark it'll look like coffee. So remember, you have your sort of basic 5 to 7 minute steep, which is great on the daily. But if you want to make it a little bit stronger, you can simmer it on the stovetop for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or make it really, really, really potent, which is only necessary, again, if you're using roots, bark, or medicinal mushrooms. You'll make a decoction, which goes for several hours, or you can make a nice nightly infusion. I hope that was inspiring. I hope that was helpful. I hope you try one of those methods and let us know what you think, what you want more of, what you have questions about, and what else we can teach you. I'm so happy to be doing this with The Alchemist Kitchen. They are family to me, and by extension, then so are you. So let us bring more herbalism, more plant-based wellness. We're here for you. Thanks so much for tuning in.